"Don't show up for Christmas," my mom said. "We'll pretend we don't know you." I didn't argue. I canceled every payment I'd been covering for years. By Christmas Eve, they were celebrating on my dime, until it all stopped. I always thought Christmas was about family, warmth, and the smell of cinnamon. And then I remembered that my family is about controlled evaluation and making it convenient for my favorite. The week before the holiday, I organized my schedule like a surgeon before a complicated operation. I freed up the evening of the 24th, rearranged duty assignments, bought everything for their favorite casserole turkey, rosemary, yams, cranberries, cinnamon. Yes, I'm the one who brings flavor, coziness, and paid bills into the family atmosphere for years, even though no one says it out loud. There were gifts too: a wool scarf for my mother, Margaret, a new set of tools for my father, Frank, expensive headphones for my brother, Oliver. And I did all of this without fanfare because, good deeds don't require applause. Although in our family, applause is always for one person, and it's definitely not me. The morning at the clinic was business as usual. Mrs. Henderson, who is 92, told me about her great-grandchildren and asked how I was doing. I of course lied that I was fine. Mr. Davis, a veteran, frowned about winter joints and demanded that I stop making him exercise. I laughed and made him do it anyway. These people see me as a doctor they can trust. It's funny how I'm more of a backup option than a major player in the family. 3 days before Christmas, Oliver calls. The voice is the same one he turns on when he wants to appear caring. "Linda," he says, "listen, we've got how can I put this? A new situation. We thought it would be better for Caitlin, his new girlfriend, if you, skip the evening this time. It's nothing personal. It's just that she's sensitive and we want to keep the atmosphere." It's nothing personal always means the opposite. I chew the air to keep from saying what I'm thinking. I ask, "Are you seriously asking me not to come?" "Don't make a tragedy of it," he replies. "It's a one-time thing." An hour later, Margaret calls. Her voice is as soft as an old cashmere sweater, but it prickles inside. "Darling, you realize this is for everyone's comfort. If you come, we won't open the door. It's for harmony." Harmony. It's always meant do what we want and don't say anything. In the background, I can hear Frank, who didn't even bother to pick up the phone. I second that. The family's image is more important. I hang up the phone and look at the to-do list on the refrigerator. Pay mom's bills, check dad's insurance, make a payment on Oliver's loan. All of these things I've been doing for years. No one notices the silence until it starts to cost something. That same evening, I opened the banking app and turned off all auto payments associated with them. Utilities? On their own now. Insurance? Good luck with that. Subscriptions to premium courses for my brother? Goodbye. I returned my parents' house key in an envelope marked return and dropped it in the mailbox. It was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet I chose for myself. I put the gifts away in the pantry. I gave half the groceries to my neighbor Mrs. Collins. She has trouble with her legs and can't go to the store. I made a casserole, but a small one, and took it to Mrs. Henderson. She cried, and at that moment I realized that my Christmas dinner had already taken place. I don't remember exactly when it became the norm in our family to think of me as some sort of service with 24/7 support. It probably happened as imperceptibly as faces age in photographs. At first you don't see the difference, and then you notice that your mother's favorite cup is cracked but still standing on the shelf. So there I was, still standing while I was conveniently used. And frankly, I didn't mind. Until today. Every transfer, every help, it won't take long, I took for granted. As if at the moment of my birth I was handed an invisible contract with the fine print. Cover expenses, listen to complaints, don't ask for thanks. Underneath that contract was my signature, or so my family thought at least. That night, as I turned off the auto payments, I caught myself doing it with the same methodicalness my grandmother had taught me to lay out a deck of cards for solitaire. Only here the rules were different. If I removed one card, the whole pyramid collapsed, but I guess it was time to see what would happen if the pyramid collapsed. The key to my parents' house was suddenly heavy in the palm of my hand, as if it had been sewn into it all the years I'd walked into that house with a bag of groceries, with prescriptions, with paying bills. Dropping it in the mailbox was like a silent gunshot, a sound no one heard, but one that changed everything for me. My kitchen still smelled of the casserole I'd made for Mrs. Henderson. I watched her eat, and I thought this is the real Christmas. Not at the table where every word is weighed so as not to ruin someone's fragile ego, but here where a simple meal and a simple thank you mean more than all the gift boxes with gold bows. I didn't lock the door. They just never learned how to knock. After their calls, I sat in the kitchen for a long time with a cup of tea that had managed to get cold while I ran their phrases through my head. It's nothing personal. They only say that when it's exactly personal and they want to hit you. In my childhood, the phrase was different. You do realize it's for your own good. Back then, it meant that I should give in to Oliver's toy or refuse to go to the movies because he's been waiting for it all year. Decades have passed and the meaning hasn't changed. I noticed that over the years I had become a master of the invisible help part. I knew how to pay my mom's utility bill without her even seeing the bill, how to cover my dad's fine and pretend it was some kind of systemic failure, how to wire my brother money for classes without waiting for him to remember that studying isn't just going to the coffee shop with a laptop. Sometimes I think that in another life, I could have been a financial angel to someone who really appreciated my support. But instead, I was wasting my energy on those who thought my help was a resource that couldn't be exhausted. Wrong. When I went out to throw out the trash in the evening, the air was cold and it stung my eyes. I walked past the mailboxes and thought that this must be what freedom looks like. No obligations, no reminders on my phone labeled family, no transfers on my app with the comments temporary. Temporary always became permanent. I got home, closed the door, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to figure out what tone to choose in responding to their messages. I just turned off the sound and let silence fill the room. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to enact a silence that no one can interrupt. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. For the first few days after Christmas, I lived like a person who had just left a noisy bar. The world was still buzzing, and you were already in silence. The silence was deceptive, though. It wasn't empty, the phone was ringing. Aunt Rose came up on the screen. Her voice was, as always, quick, direct, and without a trace of diplomacy. Linda, they had a circus. And I don't mean the presents under the tree. They were sitting at the table, all dignified. Caitlin in heels, Oliver in his trademark. I'm the center of the universe. And then she saw the picture on the mantel, you in green scrubs next to Grandma May. You know what she said? That's the doctor who saved my grandmother from a stroke. She held her hand all night while we waited for the neurologist. I shut up because if you say one word, Aunt Rose goes ballistic. Oh, I asked. And that was it. She stood up, put down her napkin and walked out. And someone I won't point fingers made a yeah, she likes to play hero joke. Can you believe it? And the evening went downhill from there. I listened and a silent, viscous brew of emotion was going on inside me. Hurtful. Yes. Amazing. No. That evening I saw what my aunt was talking about. There was a post by Caitlin on a local forum and social media. There were no names or addresses, but the description of the situation at the hospital was so accurate that even without names, everyone knew who she was talking about. Real kindness doesn't require applause at the holiday table, she wrote. The comments flowed like water on a spring river. Some told me how I'd helped with the paperwork, some how I'd sat next to them while their father waited for an ambulance. By lunchtime the phone vibrated. Mom. Honey, did you see that? It's not pretty. We need to make it look right. Right that it's a misunderstanding. We're all in favor of family. An hour later Oliver called. Linda, listen, it's all blown out of proportion. I need you to tell me that Kathleen overreacted. It's nothing personal, I've got a contract coming up, HR's looking at social media. Come on, let's team up. I gave them both the same answer. I'm not participating. The next day in my mailbox, a letter from my mom. The handwriting is neat like a schoolteacher's. Let's reboot. We're ready to forget the old stuff. In return, convince me to delete the post. Inside were printouts of comments with red markings and captions. Delete this one. Fix this one. It was as if my life was a school essay they were correcting before handing in. And then there was a family chat room where my dad wrote, Linda's going through a rough patch, emotional instability. Please be supportive and don't add fuel to the fire. Aunt Rose sent a screenshot and succinctly added, I don't play these games. I sat in the residence room, reading this and thinking that if they were paid to try to manage other people's opinions, They would have bought a second home a long time ago. That evening, the clinic receptionist brought me a bouquet of white gerberas, without a note. She said, "Maybe from that girl in the post?" I just shrugged. The flowers weren't the point of the story. When Rose told me all this, I realized I wasn't even angry. The tiredness overrode everything. It's like listening to a noisy air conditioner for a long time, and then suddenly it turns off, and silence presses into your ears. Except in that silence you can hear all too clearly someone trying to run your reputation like it's their personal property. I remembered how many years they'd lived with my transfers, my insurance, my purchases, all while feeling like I was a background tune that played itself and never ended. Apparently, they thought the music couldn't stop until someone pulled the plug. Well, the fork is now in my hands. There was something in Caitlin's post that stuck out more than words of gratitude. There was an outsider's perspective, honest and unfiltered. Not the way my family is used to, where the truth is served with so much seasoning that only the smell remains of the original dish. She wrote simply, "The doctor who stayed." No unnecessary embellishments, no attempts to make it part of someone else's drama. I read it and realized, it's a blow to them, because in this version of events they're not in charge. After my mom and Oliver called, I noticed that I was holding the phone so tightly that my fingers were white. And it wasn't because I was afraid. It was just weird that they were using the same words like they had the same writer. "It's nothing personal. It's for the good of the family. We need to make it look right. You could make a play out of it. A tragicomedy." The letter in the mailbox looked almost innocent. Beige envelope, neat address, but inside was an instruction manual for rewriting reality. The red marks on the commentary printouts reminded me of school notebooks, where the teacher corrects every comma. The only difference was that here they were correcting not the text but my life. I caught myself thinking that they would have loved to have a control panel for me. A respond gently button, a quiet the scandal button, a transfer money button, and of course the erase memory of unpleasant conversations button. Except that I've now thrown that remote away, without the right to restore it. In the residence room I read a message from my father about emotional instability, and thought it was their favorite trick. Make you look like the problem so no one would notice the real cause of the conflict. That's the role I've been in since I was a kid. Too loud, too quiet, too smart, too straightforward. It all depended on what they needed in the moment. The gerberas on the table at the clinic smelled fresh, but that smell seemed almost foreign. I realized that whoever had sent them, this gesture was not about forgiveness or reconciliation. It's just a sign that the truth spoken aloud doesn't always need to be defended. Sometimes it needs only to be heard. When I finished reading the comments tonight, I wasn't looking for my justification there. It was enough for me to know that people remembered what really happened. There was no game in those lines, no attempt to please or win an argument. There was a simple statement, "She stayed." And I realized that sometimes all you need is one person who saw the truth and said it out loud. Not to humiliate anyone, but just to restore balance. Because if you stay silent for too long, the scales break, and then no one will believe they could ever stand even again. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay to see me put everyone in their place. When there was a knock on the door, I knew right away that it wasn't my neighbor getting salt. It was a short knock, then another and another. It sounded as if they were trying to break not only the door, but also my patience. I open it and there's the whole troop on the mat. Margaret with a box of cookies as if she were going to visit kind relatives, Frank with a folder of papers, Oliver in his company logo jacket, the same look he usually wore to job interviews, where confidence was supposed to replace competence. "We're here to talk," Margaret begins, her smile as thin as a taut string. "This will take a little time. We need to settle this before it goes too far." I let them inside. They sit down, leaving wet footprints on the mat. I put the kettle on, get 3 glasses, no more no less. I put my folder on the table. Not the decorative one, but the one that holds the years of my silent participation in their comfort. The situation is out of control. Frank begins, looking as if we're in a bank meeting. "We're all affected. We need to agree on versions. You'll say that everything was a misunderstanding, that no one excluded you but just asked for a vacation. And you'll convince Caitlin to delete the post. For Oliver's future. For the family. It's nothing personal," Oliver adds, nodding in time with his own words. "It's just business. HR doesn't like scandal. I open the folder. Receipts, statements, printouts of transfers, utilities, insurance, roof repairs, fines, code camp, rent. Letters from them asking me to help. It's not for bargaining, I say. It's for clarity. All these years I have given money, time, silence. Today I'm saying no more. No more money. No silence. No forgiveness. Margaret reaches for the papers as if she could erase them with a touch. Her voice breaks. We're not talking about money, Linda. We're talking about feelings. You always make things so complicated. We asked for a temporary solution. Frank inserts. You're being dramatic. You owe us. Oliver slices in. Thanks to your family, you owe us anything at all. I don't owe anyone anything, I interrupt. A pause. The air is thick, like soup that's been left out of the salt. Margaret's tone changes to a caressing, almost sing-songy tone. I carried you. I was there for you. Let's reboot. It's been soft for years, I reply. And soft has always been out of my favor. Frank raises his voice. You're putting us at risk. It's a blow to Oliver's contracts, to our connections. This is your election, I say. And your consequences. My election is my boundaries. I open the door. Margaret comes out first, clutching the box of cookies to her chest like a shield. Frank lingers, trying to burn me with his gaze, but the look doesn't change anything anymore. Oliver drops it. You ruined everything. I don't answer. I close the door. There was something in their faces, a mixture of confidence that they could still dictate terms to me, and a slight bewilderment that their methods were no longer working. They were used to me agreeing. That I move money as soon as they hint at a problem. That I adjust to their moods, even if I'm barely on my feet myself after a tour of duty. I remembered how I'd paid Oliver's rent a year ago because he hadn't had time to transfer funds from his account. How I closed my mom's dental bill, so she wouldn't have to run around to friends for loans. How she bought my dad winter tires and pretended it was a gift, and not a necessity so he could drive to his job. And here they stand, seriously thinking it can all be blown out of proportion with a single request to reboot. The kettle boiled and I poured water into glasses, but no one touched their tea. They looked at the papers as if they were evidence in a trial they wanted to overturn. Frank was tapping his fingers on his knee. He always does that when he's nervous but wants to appear calm. Margaret sighed and said a phrase I'd heard too many times. We're family, Linda. You can't just cut yourself off from us like that. I can, I said. And I did. Oliver grinned wryly, but it wasn't a smile. More the grin of a man who was used to winning at the expense of other people's pliability. Do you think you're stronger than us? He asked. I think I'm stronger than I was a year ago, I said, and in that moment it was the truth. They looked at each other. There was something in their eyes that I used to take for concern but now saw as strategy, assessing how best to push. Frank tried to come at it from a different angle. You don't want people to think there's discord in our family, do you? I laughed. Not loudly, but enough to make tension hang in the room. They already know. And you know what? It's not my problem. After I said those words, things got easier. It was like someone opened a window and the stale air came out. They were still saying something, but I could only hear bits and pieces. My decision didn't change. When they left, I stood at the door for a long time, listening to the sounds of the entryway. Their footsteps died down, and I felt something like relief. Not joy, not victory, just relief, like relief after a long illness, when you can finally breathe without pain. I walked to the kitchen, put away their untouched tea, folded the papers back into the folder, and put it on the shelf. The folder wasn't a symbol of revenge. It was a reminder for me to never go back to the old scenario again. In the evening, I stepped out onto the balcony. The streetlights were burning below, cars were passing by, people were hurrying home. Everyone had their own lives, their own worries. And in that moment, I realized that my life had finally stopped revolving around other people's demands. I breathed in the cold air and realized that silence is not emptiness. It's a space where there are no voices dictating how you should live your life. And that space now belonged to me.